Yay, yay, yay. So here we are today, Chevre. We're having a little bit of problems, but we will get through them. And now we're going to the next. We've already seen this, Shalom Aleichem. And today, for some reason, we're having technical issues. Oh,
Well, I mean, it's been a long, thankfully, gratefully, a long career. It's hard to know what the difference is exactly. It's a hard question to answer, and I kind of don't really know the different audiences. I mean, in English, I feel I feel way more comfortable in Yiddish than I do in English. I work in English a lot, but I feel entitled in Yiddish. I feel like I've earned my stripes. Um, I am unique in that way. In English, I feel less unique. I feel less. I feel like more. There are people that are way better than me, whatever that means, and English is, and English is, I've done fine, but I'm never as comfortable as I am in Yiddish, which is too bad because most people don't speak Yiddish, and of course I always wanted my career to be in English, not in Yiddish. And Yiddish, when I was first starting out, I went to see this agent when I was working with Mary at Town Hall. I said, I'm in a show, and I'd like you to see it. And he said, I said, it's this Yiddish play at Town Hall that seats, 1,400 people. I mean, it wasn't a slouchy piece of work. And he said, don't tell anybody you do Yiddish. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, they'll just typecast you, and don't tell anyone you do it. It will limit you. And I took his advice, and I spent many years as a closeted Yiddishist, as though I was turning tricks at night or something horrible. I worked in secret. So it was a funny, not really, but I ran the other direction, really, and my audience was running to me, and I was running like, no, I don't do Yiddish. I do English. I want to do English. And Yiddish, my heart is in English, in Yiddish. My ego is in English, but my heart is in Yiddish.
ay, ay, ay. My ego is in Yiddish. My ego is in English, but my heart is in Yiddish. And my heart is with my next guest, Eleanor Reissa, who is one of my dearest friends in the world. And I owe her this enormous apology because we've had some technical difficulties getting into this Zoom. So before I invite my dear friend, Eleanor Reissa, to join me, I just want you to know what I already know, which is how amazing she really is. Eleanor Reissa is a Tony-nominated director, international concert artist, award-winning playwright, and Broadway actor, off-Broadway too. Fluent in two languages, English and Yiddish, she has lived a life in the theater for over 50 years.
Oh, no!
Oh, I'm sorry, 30 years.
My good friend, Avi Hoffman,
For over 30 years in nearly every entertainment medium and in many parts of the world. Her work is unique. I was thinking of myself. I've been doing this for
sure.
50 years.
You can't get
I
out of
did.
it.
I started 50 years ago.
Alles an Kagen mir.
Her work is unique and honest and authentic and reflects who she is. Ladies and gentlemen, to the Mishigas, I invite my dear, dear friend.
Sure, I've been in the theater for 60, 70 years. The
No,
last 100 years, my career is really
no,
starting to take off.
30 years in the
40,
theater.
40,
All
yes.
right. No, all right.
50,
We'll negotiate. 38 and a half. Eleanor.
hi, Avi.
Hi. I love you.
I love
I'm
you too.
sorry for the troubles. We had technical difficulties, but we are now live on YouTube and we'll transfer it over to our Facebook when we're ready. In any event, Shalom Aleichem Taire.
Thank you. You too.
Shalom
Shalom
Aleichem
Aleichem,
Taire.
Avi. Aleichem Shalom.
I told you earlier that I am more excited about this than I think almost every other schmooze I've done with anybody, including some very, very important people in my life. And that's because, and you know this, and I guess we'll tell the people watching, that in many ways I think I owe you a lot of my career. And we could talk about that later. But first, I'd like to know a little bit, if you don't mind telling us in your own words. Um, my ego is in English, my heart is in Yiddish. I just find that so profound. And I understand it because for so many years, I also felt like I had to run away from the Yiddish. Back in the day when we were doing Yiddish theater, everybody was like, "Oh, you're doing Yiddish theater? Ugh, I'm sorry." Like that was, if you were doing Yiddish theater, somehow that was a fleck, a spot on your career. So can you tell me a little bit about number one, where you come from, your background, your family, and how you got into the theater in the first place?
That'll take 14 hours. So my family they came from Poland and they came from Germany. I mean, they were born in Poland, but they came from Germany after the war in late 49, early 50. They met here, they met there, they were cousins, which maybe explains a little bit about me. And my father was in Auschwitz, my mother was in Uzbekistan, and that's where they each spent the war years, more or less, and then in DP camps in Ulm and in Stuttgart. Um, and I was born in Brooklyn. I'm the only child that they had. They each had children with previous people who were killed or ran away. And that marriage lasted for, till I was 5, and then um, that ended. I'm a Brooklyn public school system from K through Brooklyn College. Um, Theater was not anything I really dreamed of, although my mother sent me for daycare to a ballet school run by a Russian who used to hit me, that was that was okay.
But
Uh,
not too hard.
Not too hard, and only to make me better. It wasn't. I wouldn't. She hit me with a stick, but it wasn't. It was nothing cruel about it. That may explain other things about me as well. I mean, so I did learn. I did dance when I was a girl, and I sang, like at amateur hours up in the bungalow colony. They would have a microphone in the clubhouse, and I would sing, "Oh My Papa" was one of my tunes.
Did your parents speak Yiddish to you growing up?
Yeah, sure.
So Yiddish was Mamalosh.
Yiddish was Mamelishan, and I had one pair of grandparents that lived uh, through the Holocaust, and I spent every summer of my life till I was 16 with them. And they were, the emesis Roire. They were the real deal. They were balabatish. They were religious. They were kusha. They were hamish. Alamilis,
Right.
all virtues, all virtues. And if I have any virtues, many of them, or whatever I have, or some of them, come from my grandparents.
Right.
So Yiddish, but it was Yiddish like Machof de Winde.
Right.
It was
Right.
that kind of Yiddish. It wasn't. I didn't learn to read.
Right.
I read Hebrew to pray, but I didn't learn to read Yiddish, and so I'm not educated
Right.
except by the theater.
Right. No, no, you're
That's where.
plenty educated. You're just not necessarily educated in Yiddish,
Well, I
like
mean, my
Yiddish.
Yiddish education is from the theater and
Right.
from songs
Right.
and from people who do speak and read and are literate and educated, who have taught me a lot of how to improve myself, which I'm always happy and anxious to do. And so, Brooklyn College, I started as a math major,
Hmm.
and I didn't do well in uh, advanced calculus, which came quickly, thankfully. And I wound up in the theater department, seeing it was a very political time, and I saw a play by Arabal, Federico Arabal, about the Spanish Civil War that moved at the Mercer Center. I mean, it had been a century ago,
Right.
but anyway, it moved me very much, this play, and so I started doing political theater,
Huh.
and that was my interest. I didn't. I also didn't know about text in English. I mean, I wanted to do political stuff, street theater, community theater to educate the masses, blah blah blah. And then somebody offered me a job and a union card, and that kind of changed everything.
Wow. So, what kind of theater did you do in the beginning when you
I
started doing
did,
theater?
well, I mean, I worked with this company called Manhattan Mass Transit Street Theater. And that was like street theater, community street theater in the Bronx and in parks.
Right.
And it was a time of the open theater. And it was a time of experimental theater, where your body and your voice told the story. It was a poor theater like Grotowski, and that's what I did, and that's what I did for a while.
Right.
Uh, yeah, yeah, it was very exciting. I mean, you didn't need much to live at that time.
Right.
$2,000, I believe. I waited tables in the Catskills all year. I drove there and back every weekend
Wow.
and made my $200 cash,
Right.
which was very nice. So I had a car and an apartment, and
Right.
I made $3,000 a year. And I did theater
Right.
in loft spaces on Bank Street and St. John's Street and at the Jean Cocteau. I mean, it was a world, really, like we say now. It was another world,
Right. Right.
and there
You
was
know,
no Yiddish.
I missed all that because I was gone. I moved to Israel when you were probably starting to get into all that stuff, and I wasn't here. I came back to a different world, which we'll get to because we met shortly after, I got back from Israel, and we started doing shows together. But there was no Yiddish at that time. For,
No, 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 no. I
right.
mean, there was, but
No, right. There was a lot of
nobody
Yiddish
my
people
age,
going.
nobody my age cared about it, and I didn't. I mean, but it was political. It was, women were coming up. It was, more civil rights stuff, more anti-war stuff.
Right.
It wasn't about Eden,
Right.
not for
There
me
was a lot of,
anyway.
abstracty kind of, experimental theater. I remember at the time, Jean-Louis Carlino, things like Telemachus Clay, where everybody sat on a stool and talked to the audience. And everybody was talking to each other. Readers theater, I guess what they called readers theater, players theater. Fascinating. So when did you get to Yiddish theater? Like, how did Yiddish suddenly become something for you?
Um, Two ways. A little. My father was in a nursing home in the 70s, and I had a boyfriend who played piano. And just for my father, I would try to entertain in this home. And he would play piano and I would sing, cabaret, What Good Is Sitting Alone in Your Room, or that kind of, you know,
Right.
but I think we might have done some version of By Mir Bist du Schön, but I don't. It wasn't that one day, like in 1978 or nine. Or something like that. There was an ad in Backstage for Mary Sirianni's show at Town Hall, and they were looking for chorus.
Right.
And I thought, well, okay. And I spoke to my mother and I said, give me a couple of lines to say in Yiddish, like, what should I say to the director? Something like maybe I can make a little joke and get a little bit ahead.
Right.
And she, I said something wrong, but the director, Michael Greenstein, a Gesinnten sein Pippik, um, they liked me,
Right.
and so I got that was my first job in Yiddish. Although Avi, I believe I auditioned once for Isaiah Sheffer for the Folkspina and to do a version, the first version of David Levinsky.
Right.
But I can't remember what year that was, which came first, Mary Suriano or David Levinsky. Anyway, the Levinsky job I never did at that time
Right.
because I got
Moishe
another job in
Rosenfeld.
English. What's
Moishe,
that?
Moishe Rosenfeld played Levinsky.
Wow.
John
Yeah. Yeah.
Levinsky.
I
Yeah.
was in rehearsal for less than a week, and I got an English job. And an English job trumped anything else. I'm out of here.
Sure.
But Mary Surianu was Rivka Ledem Rebens, and I had the smallest part in the show, one of the Maidlach.
Right.
Um, but
Hmm.
and in that show was Razel Buzik, Shifra Lera,
The
Karol
greats.
Latovich, uh,
Greats.
uh, 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 Felix Fibish did the choreography,
Wow.
and we were
Wow.
supposed to go on tour. We played for 12 weeks or something.
At
We
Town
were
Hall.
the town hall. We played long enough. They made sure to play us so we could collect unemployment.
Right.
We played between rehearsal and performance. We could collect. It was so balabatish.
Menschlich. Menschlich. It was
Menschlich, and
so
ganzen Menschlich. That was Raymond Ariel
right.
producing and David Carey of that.
Sure.
And the day we were supposed to go, we were going to do a national tour beginning in Philadelphia at the Schubert, a major house.
Right.
And Mary took ill
Hmm.
and they canceled the tour. But I called Raymond, the producer, and I said, look, I think I could do it. And to make a long story short, we left that day for Philadelphia. The actors cued me. We ran lines in the van. And that night I went on as the lead. And
Wow.
it was, the lead is easy.
Right.
I mean, the lead, all the good lines are yours, the good songs are yours, the good entrances, the good exits. You just, it's fun. It's the most fun because everybody turns to you. Anyway, so I played it for about a month on the road, and that was the beginning. That
Right.
was the beginning.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, it's fascinating because you and I have so many things in common. And yet we have a lot of things that are, not in common because I, of course, didn't even speak English for the first 5 years. I was going to a Yiddish shul. I was learning Yiddish songs and Yiddish literature, Yiddish poetry as a child. I was in with, the melodics and the Schechters and the Gottesmans and the Fishmans. And Yiddish theater was just something that kind of naturally, became an outgrowth because I would go see it. And then when I was 10, they heard about me and asked me to come work in the Volksbühne with Jack Rechtzeit and, and Tzipora Speisman and all of these great people. And then we moved to Israel. And in Israel, there was no Yiddish whatsoever. Nobody wanted even to hear the word. So, but then when I came back and finished college around those years, early 1980-ish, is when I finally came back to New York because of Ben Bonus. Suddenly, Ben Bonus heard that I was here, and he called me up and offered me the lead role in his Schmiedstechte. Ironically, when I arrived, he decided that his audience couldn't accept a play where he wasn't playing the lead. So he ended up playing the young love interest. He was 83, and I played the 80-year-old bookseller. So, it's fascinating. Yiddish theater is such a fascinating world. Um, so tell me about the 80s, because this is when you and I kind of got together. From my perspective, I could certainly tell my side of the story, but I'd like to hear how you came, into the more significant Yiddish theater, especially starting with the Golden Land. I mean,
You
the
know,
Mary Story.
after I did that, after I played the lead in Mary's show, and then she did a couple more shows, and I had bigger and bigger parts, and I met Zalman on his 30th birthday by a fluke. This guy at the piano who knew Yiddish, and a guy who uh, attractive and uh, talented, and he had heard about me too, the girl who took over for Mary,
Right,
and so I mean, look, memory and history is so uncertain and I'm not sure exactly what's true, but this is what I believe is true, that shortly after I met him, he because his father Yossel ran the Workman's Circle cultural department. I started doing concerts.
right,
So Zalman started teaching me songs, and I didn't really believe I could sing. I mean, my mother was extremely unsupportive of my singing. She called it pishching,
hmm,
and
hmm,
but so I told jokes. I would tell jokes and sing. That was what I would do because I didn't think the singing was quite good enough. So Zalman helped me with that, and Mina Byrne would be on the date, and I mean a whole plethora. We did it in Westchester with the Mandels. I mean, Menschen was in Stu, aber ich hab lieb sie zu damanen, really,
right,
because they were not only advocates for Yiddish, they were extremely kind and supportive of me, always,
right.
always. So that kind of began it, and then Zalman and Moshe had this thing for the forward, the 100th anniversary or the 50th anniversary, and
100th, yeah, 100th.
100th.
No, 75th. It was the 75th anniversary.
So
Mary
me,
came
you,
out.
Phyllis, Moshe,
Yeah.
uh, went to the Stevensville, and we put together this potpourri review. And the part about it that was so was that we were all young,
Right,
and we were all young, and our Yiddish was good, and we had talent, and we meant what we said and did, and so we moved people and surprised the heck out of them.
right.
And so that was the beginning, in a way, of a movement, I think.
I agree. I always say in all my work that the Golden Land, as far as I'm concerned, was the first modern revolution in the history of the Yiddish theater
I
because
mean,
it changed everything.
it changed everything. It
Yeah,
changed because when I replaced Mary in Rebecca the Rabbi's Daughter, the union, the Hebrew Actors Union, said there were no understudies because there was no young people there were no young people. I mean, so this sort of showed the world a little bit that there were young people.
right,
And look, I mean, there was a generation missing between those actors, between the Mina, the Schiffer, the Razel, and us.
right,
There were those people who were killed.
right,
That the
right.
There was a
And
section of people somewhere between 80 and 30 that didn't make it.
right. And there was a group of actors that I remember from back in the late 60s. But they didn't stay with it. They had no interest. There wasn't enough work. The work was deteriorating. It wasn't that interesting. Most of the shows were Chanale the Yesoimis Tochte and the Schmied's Tochte and a lot of Chasanis and the Chasanin Shtetl and a Chasanin
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
so they lost interest in the material. What made our Golden Land, I think, so incredible was that even though the material in some ways was still older material, our approach was so contemporary and young and
Yeah.
modern,
Yeah.
and our interpretations were young and
And
fresh,
we were passionate. I mean,
and we were
we
so
were so passionate.
yeah,
We were so passionate about the political, the politics and the working class and women,
right.
and uh, yeah, it was just it was stunning. It
It
was
was
stunning.
stunning, and it
Yeah.
had an amazing life. People, I
Yes.
don't think a lot of people really remember or realize we did that one performance at the Stevensville Hotel. Our standing ovation lasted so long that Zalman and Moshe realized they had a tiger by the tail, and thus began a 4 year, at least for me. It was 4 years of various productions and
Yes.
tours, and
Yes.
we ended up at the Lincoln Center playing for Reagan, and we did, we went all over the country, Canada, and then we were off Broadway, and then we were off Broadway again, and then it went through another evolution, and Broadway directors, and all sorts of. But for me, the most important thing that came out of that was that I got to meet you. No,
Thanks.
no, I mean, you're laughing. You can laugh if you like. But as I look back on my life, well, let's go on. So after the Golden Land, now suddenly I get a call from you. And you said to me, Avi, there's a play, there's a musical, they're doing it. It's called The Rise of David Levinsky. You have to go audition.
I remember you had a fever, right? You were sick.
I was sick as a dog. And I said, Eleanor, was willst du für mein Leben? I can't. It's another, so it's a play. Big deal. I can't. I'm too sick. I can't sing. I can't do anything. And you literally said, if you don't go to audition, I will beat the shit out of you.
I definitely didn't say that.
Well, something like it. It might have been worse. So, so I ended up going and I got the lead role in English. This was not in Yiddish. This was an English version of the Yiddish version that Isaiah Sheffer had done that you auditioned for and didn't get.
Oh, no, I
So
did get it.
you got the Levinsky in Yiddish.
Yes.
Oh, in Yiddish. I did. I thought you
Oh
said
no, I
you.
got.
Oh,
I
you
was
got it,
one.
but then you got
Yeah.
something else and you
Yeah.
left. Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. So now here we were together in an off-Broadway production at the 92nd Street Y, which is where it started on Lexington. And so again, I know how that changed my life because suddenly I was playing the lead role opposite, some serious people. And eventually it led to us doing it again and again, Um, and it ended up being a very big production, or the largest off Broadway production of its time, at the Houseman Theater. What do you remember about Levinsky? I'm just curious what your take on it in terms of its place in the canon of Jewish theater.
Well, I mean, I, I don't. Its place in the canon of Jewish theater. The canon of Jewish theater is so large.
Right.
My feeling or about it has most to do with the the book writer
Right.
Isaiah Sheffer, who I became very good friends with, and who I adored and was much beloved. So, in a way, that was one of the largest aspects of that play for me. And otherwise, I mean, I was the female lead in
Right.
that play, but I was a little young for
Right.
it, actually. And the men that I played opposite, the first one was Larry
Keith.
Keith, who, was, had 30 years on me or 25 years on me at that time, and
Right.
would today still if he was here to, but now he's ageless and that doesn't matter. But so Larry Keith, who was formidable, and then Larry Kurt.
Right.
And so
And
the
in
other,
between there was Larry
Larry
Luckin.
Luckenbill,
Right.
yes, and Larry Kurt was the last one.
Right.
Or but
Yeah.
and to
Yes.
me, having met Larry Kurt,
Right.
having worked with Larry Kurt, who, in case our audience doesn't know who he was in West Side Story,
The
in
original Tony.
the original Tony, and he was also in Company, and
That's
he
right.
was a beautiful man inside and out, and sang like an angel, and
Mhm.
was a terrific guy,
Oh,
and got caught in the early round of the AIDS
right.
deaths.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so to me, and look, you were great in it, and Larry Rake, and it was a cast of
But you
terrific
right,
people.
but you were perfect for the part because you had to be both of our love interests.
Yeah, yeah,
That was the thing. We both
right,
played
right,
Levinsky. I
right,
was young, he was old. All
right.
the Larrys were the older Levinsky. I
Yeah,
was always the young Levinsky, and you had to be our both of our love interests. So you were that perfect because you could be there our
yeah.
both of our
It was hard to be older. It was hard for
right,
me at that time. As we did it over and over, it was easier. But even though ich bin ein ganzen Weiß jetzt, oder will nicht ein ganzen, ein bisschen noch out, I'm
right,
decomposing slowly. Um, it, it's hard for me to play old.
right,
It's not, some people have that in them when they're really young. They
right,
have that ability to play older people. It's always been challenging for me. I'm starting. It's
right,
starting to fit, but I'm not that excited about it.
right. I mean, look, for me, when I say the canon of Jewish theater, the rise of David Levinsky was based on one of the greatest Jewish novels of all time by the same name, written by Abraham Kahan. And so for me, the idea that that musical lives in a certain place for Jewish literature is what made it so, important in my eyes.
Well, I
And
mean, and for you as an artist, you got to do everything that you do.
right,
I mean, all of your skills and craft and talent, you were able to put into this character.
right,
Everything. And everything was a lot.
right. Thank you.
Yeah. So I understand, in a way, for you it resonates terrifically. Where, let's say, for me, Yentl,
Right,
playing Yentl resonates like that,
right,
where I get to be everything and do everything that I can do.
right.
You know, so
But for
it's,
my career, Levinsky changed my
yeah,
career.
not mine.
Changed, right, I understand. But for my career, it changed the trajectory, and I wouldn't have had it without you. If you wouldn't have called me and threatened me, I wouldn't have gone to audition. I wouldn't have gotten it, and my life would have been very different. Maybe better, but probably not. No, definitely not. Now that I think about it. Um, but what Levinsky again solidified for me and you is that I was even more in love with you after Golden Land. Levinsky made it even stronger. So then, shortly after Levinsky, where did we both end up? You were doing more Yiddish theater, more English theater, right? I mean, mid 80s, Levinsky was over by 86,
Well, I mean,
87.
yeah. Well, we did Songs of Paradise, Avi. Isn't that
Ah,
the next thing that
that's
happened?
where I was going.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
Just had,
that's
you know.
where I was going. But I wondered what was in between for you.
I mean, all I did was hustle. I mean, I auditioned for, I did boatloads of commercials at that time. I was the only or one of the few curly haired brunettes that were doing, P and Procter and Gamble spots. And because I guess I was kind of funny.
Right,
And so that like a commercial was really important to me because it was American, because it was national, because I mean, besides
made
that the
you money.
money was
Right,
good,
right,
it was being on television, even if it was only for a 60-second spot
right.
selling Camrys or, a Honda or something. Um, but eventually you called me for Songs of Paradise.
Right. So for those of you watching who don't know Songs of Paradise, I always think of that show as the second modern revolution in Yiddish theater because number one, it was young people, you and me and Kenner and Rosalie and Adrian Cooper. It was the
Rock
lyrics,
and roll. It was rock and roll and
right.
jazz and Yiddish.
Right. It was a new modern interpretation with new material. The scenes were written new. These were not old Yiddish theater scenes that we were putting into something in a different perspective. This was literally new Yiddish theater, which hadn't been done in a very long time. And so, we did it opening night. I remember in Riverdale. We developed it over a few years, and then we decided to do a production at the Riverdale Y. And do you remember who was there opening night?
I hate when you feed me like layup shots,
Well,
really.
but to me, that was again a major trajectory change. That Joe Papp, decided that he wanted to have a little Yiddish theater group. And he let us do our thing in Riverdale. And I don't think he expected very much. And opening night, he came to the show in Riverdale. And he came on stage after our curtain went down. He literally walked up onto the stage, shook our hands. I will never forget this as long as I don't have dementia. And he basically said to the audience that we were going to go open at the public theater a month from then. And that happened. So, can you share with me and the people watching your impressions of that experience opening at the public in Yiddish theater?
It was a long time ago.
Yeah,
Um, and it was really, of course, exciting. I mean, we shared a green room, I want to say, with Mandy Patinkin,
that's
right?
right. Mandy Patinkin
And
and Superman.
yes, and Chris Reeves. They were doing Winter's Tale or
No,
something.
they were doing Two Gentlemen of Verona. They were
And
the Two Gentlemen of Verona, I
I
believe.
just, I loved going to work. I loved walking through the lobby, saying hello to the guys that, were at each doorway and walking into the Shiva Theater. And it was a bit of a dream, and it was a bit of like, look who belongs here.
Right,
Um, so yeah, but I have to tell you, Avi, I have a feeling I didn't know how good a time to have.
right.
This is, and this is my, if I had any regrets in my life, I don't have many except for how I behave towards myself,
Mm,
um, without really. I minimized my accomplishments and didn't, I just didn't really take in, because I didn't know how to take in good.
right.
Uh, how, like, wasn't that terrific? No, instead I thought, I didn't hit that note. I
Mm,
didn't I didn't hit the note in that song. It was too high. I didn't hit it. And it's really a shanda, um, and it's taken me a really long time to try to not do that anymore. What a waste!
Right.
What a waste! It was a terrific time, but I didn't know it.
Well, and it was still Yiddish theater, and in those days was different. It still wasn't
Secondary, still
right. It was
secondary.
still kind of secondary. The agents all were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Public theater, okay, that's nice, but it's still Yiddish theater. And we were selling out every single performance, 8 shows a week for about 8 months. As a matter of fact, as I looked back and did the research, it turns out we were actually, I think to this day, one of the 10 longest running shows in the history of the public theater, which is, when I look back at it, I go, I had no idea. But even within the public theater, I always felt like we were the
Second
orphan
class.
child. That was, oh, yeah, yeah, that's the over there, that's the Yiddish thing.
Yeah, it's a pet of
Right.
Joe Paps.
Joe Papp's pet project.
Yeah,
And sadly, of course, Joe died shortly thereafter. We did move the show across the street to the Astor Place for a short while, but that didn't really work out very well. And then we went to Europe a couple of times. I mean,
that was
Songs of
great.
Paradise, yeah, I mean, it had a
That was
really
great.
nice life.
It did have a nice life. And I just want to say, I mean, the the part that I think fondest of about it is creating it.
Right.
You directed, I choreographed,
That's right.
and
And Rosalie wrote the
and
music,
Rosalie wrote the music,
and all
and
three of us were in it.
to have for me to have the chutzpah to choreograph.
Right.
Um, and I remember going, to the Performing Arts Library and looking at Egyptian dance because we had that number um,
Right.
where we were,
Hager and the Turk.
yes,
Hager and the
Hager,
Turk.
that's right.
That's right.
And so just doing research on how to choreograph and what Turkish and Egyptian movement was, and our Adam and Eve and the dance, solving problems. That's always my favorite part, frankly.
Right.
That's I like that.
And the creativity that you brought, that Rosalie brought to the music, that I brought to the direction, that my mom and Rena
Yeah.
brought to the book. I mean, it was just one of those combinations of everything together that really, again, I see it as a revolution, because after that, Yiddish theater started to evolve into many, new things happening and new groups coming up and new people trying, because suddenly there was a semi hit in Yiddish beyond the Yiddish world. Like the public theater gave it a certain legitimacy
Absolutely,
that
absolutely. Cachet. It put
couldn't
the
get at
Hefner on
town
it.
hall and you couldn't get for Ben Bonus. The people still looked at that stuff as, oh yeah, yeah, that Yiddish theater, but we were suddenly something different. And I think had Joe not passed away, we would be having a very different conversation now. So Songs of Paradise. Um, shortly thereafter, I left New York. So can you share with me, and the people watching? So what happened after, and let's get to where I think one of the great accomplishments for you is Indecent. The idea of being a part of that.
Well,
Uh,
I would
the law.
hesitate. I would stop first and make a major stop at Those Were the Days,
Right. That's right.
which was my first Broadway show, and it was the first, I think it was the first show I directed. And like everything else, like The Golden Land and like Songs of Paradise, it
Right.
was supposed to play for 2 weeks in Philly.
Right.
And that was that. That was all it was going to do. And so that for me
Right.
was a game changer. Not as much a game changer as I had hoped it would be, but nonetheless, it was a game changer. Um,
Tony nominations.
Tony nomination for me and for
That's
Bruce
right.
Adler,
The great Bruce
and
Adler.
that was a show. It was just supposed to be 2 weeks in Philadelphia.
Right. And Brucey was in Levinsky with us. And
Yeah,
Brucey was in The
eventually,
Golden Land with
eventually,
us. Yes,
eventually,
eventually.
in the
And he
last
was
in the last version.
right, but he was also in the Golden Land and also in
Correct,
Levinsky and
correct,
also, yeah,
correct.
amazing.
So I mean, and as a matter of fact, I mean, I was with you in your apartment on in May of 1990 when Max Eisen, the publicist,
That's right.
called me. Those were the days had closed. We closed like I don't know. We ran for 3 4 months of Gedenknish, and it was a bad time. It was the Iraq War, the first
Right.
Iraq War, and Scuds into Israel, and that was that time. So Jews were not running to the theater so much. But I was with you, and the phone rang. It was Max Eisen, and he said, "I'm just calling to tell you that Bruce Adler was nominated for a Tony." And I said, "Wow, great! He owes me $100 because I had bet him that he would be because he was so good in
Right.
it. He was so damn good in it."
He was damn
And then Eisen said, "But you got a nomination too." Es hat mir nicht reingefallen, really. And so I directed, choreographed, and was in it. And I said, "Me? In what category?" I didn't know as what, and
right.
it was as director. And it was
Wow.
a shocking it was a shocking thing to
That's
me. I
right.
I was shocked, and so that kind of put a small hecture on my career as a director and as Broadway. Um, so that uh, that that was a big thing for
Right.
me. Um, and if you want to scooch to indecent,
Well, no, no, no. I want you to give us a sense of between that and indecent, and we don't have to go into every single production because you
I
did so
I
much.
mean, I can tell you it was harder than I thought. Frankly, I thought, "Hey, I'm a Tony nominee.
Yeah.
What's my next project?
Right.
Doesn't anybody who's coming to me with my next project?" And it didn't quite happen.
Right.
I mean, you know, my career has not been like a vertical climb. It's been fairly jagged, and some stuff came in, but no offense to any of the stuff, it wasn't A level. It was stuff that needed work, and I put work in and helped make it, like Cowgirls, for example,
Right.
at the Cherry Lane theater, not Cherry Lane, the Minetta Lane.
Right.
And that was a show that I was so grateful had nothing to do with Jews. It
Right.
was a
But it,
classical music, country western, all girl extravaganza that was a terrific piece of work, and went to some of the best regional theaters before it came into New York at the same time as Rent.
right.
So that was that, kind of. That
Right.
was that was that was how that came and didn't make it. It was that season.
Dafür Mazel.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's
Dafür
correct.
Mazel.
And in the meantime, I started writing and was writing plays. And the play that you're going to do at Yiddishkeit Initiative tomorrow was written in the 90s.
Right. Good. We'll talk about that, but let's go for just a second to indecent, because that too for me was a revolution. I look at that production that you were in, and I know Rebecca Teichman won the Tony for directing that. But man, what an experience that must have been. Um,
I,
what?
you know, it was, look, I mean, I was an understudy,
Right.
right?
Yes.
I got to go on 6 times. Um, I have never in my 30, at that time, 35 years in show business, been an understudy. Never, never,
Right.
not once. And frankly, people had to really do to me what I did to you and say they're going to kick the shit out of me if I don't accept this job. I, I mean, I didn't want to be an understudy. I'm grateful
No,
beyond
I understand.
to
I
have been a
understand.
part of that show, to know Paula, to know Rebecca, to know all that the cast that was wonderful. My fellow understudies, it was it was a great thing ultimately for me in every way,
Right.
in every single way. It also changed it changed me a lot. It just put me back in the world where maybe I hadn't been. You know, it's like a wave. It's all such a life. Show business is such a wave, and
Right.
so that was in 2018, I
Right.
think.
So, but here's my question, because I've done Indecent twice now, and but not obviously on Broadway. For me, it it gave me the ability to reintegrate in a very contemporary way my Yiddish with my English, with my own personal history, because I don't know if you know, my grandparents came from Lodz. The Lodge acting group in Indecent went to Auschwitz. My father was in Auschwitz. My father was sick in Auschwitz, and a group of Yiddish theater actors came into the infirmary to perform for them. For actually, the kid who was underneath my father was the son of a famous rabbi. And you know, that troupe was the Lodge Theater Group. So, you know, for me, it brought just so many different dots together in my life. So, Indecent, you know, I think is a nice segue to talk about the plays you wrote in the 90s that integrated some of your personal stories into theater. And yes, we'll talk about what we're doing tomorrow, which I think is extraordinary because we are featuring your work tomorrow in our Yom HaShoah commemoration events. So, can you tell us about writing The Last Survivor, writing The Last One in Epilogue, writing, you know, you talked about your parents and their experiences. How did you integrate that into your writing?
I mean, my writing basically was a way for me to channel my loss of them. It was, uh, I mean, it was, that's what it was for. It was my opportunity to speak to them, to give them, to breathe, to continue to breathe life into them. That was my interest. I mean, so the first part that I wrote was the monologue. Oh, not actually. It was at the cemetery. You know, when the father dies. I mean, and that was because I I couldn't bear it. I mean, I needed to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. How many times I felt so sorry. I was so sorry.
Right,
And and the way I know how to express myself is in the theater.
right,
So um, that's so the writing has become very very important to me, and I can give you some breaking news in that just yesterday, this book that I've written has now gotten a publisher.
yeah.
So, so
Wow.
that
Oh,
was
how cool.
that's really nice, and
Oh,
that too is about them. It's about them,
right,
but about them is about me. I am. It's hard to do me without them, or
sure.
vice versa.
Right.
So, um,
Wow,
and
that's amazing. When is it being published? When is it coming out?
they say a year from now, in time for Yom HaShoah next year.
Wow, wow, wow. So in that book are two of the pieces that we are doing
Not
to
that book, Avi.
Another one. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the book that I mean, the book that the plays are in
Right,
is a book I self-published, uh, The Last Survivor and Other Modern Jewish Plays.
right.
I published that.
Okay. I didn't realize. So this is another book. What is the new book?
The new book is about these letters that I have
Right.
that my father wrote to my mother in 1949, and this trip that I took to Germany and Israel to see what's what. So it's that. It's a memoir of me and them, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
I
that.
know about these letters and now I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
But why don't you tell the people watching a little bit about what it is?
Well, I mean, it's I wish I had the elevator speech. I'm always really bad at the elevator speech, but what it is the book. I There were these letters that when my mother died, I found 60 letters, 60,
Wow.
all written in a language that I thought, what is this? I mean, she spoke Polish, Russian, Yiddish, English, but I don't think she spoke German. But the letters look like they're in German, and so I had them thanks to Indecent in a way, because now I had some money thanks to Indecent. Good paycheck for 6 months.
Right.
Um, I got a translator, or a few actually, and then one of the translators said, "Well, I'm going to be in Stuttgart, which is where the letters are written from. So if you want to go, I'll go with you." And I thought, go? Why am I going to go to Stuttgart? What's in Stuttgart? And who's going to pay? And I'm going to pay. I mean, that's who's going to pay. I'm going to pay. And but thankfully, I said I would go, and that's what the book is about. The book is about what I found out.
Wow.
And I found out a lot, and I
Right.
found out a lot about myself also.
Right.
I mean, I'm thrilled about that.
Oh, that's so exciting. Mazel tov, Eleanor.
Thank you, Avi.
Amazing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a nice thing. That's a really good thing.
So let's tell them a little bit before we finish
Okie doke.
about The Last Survivor and the last one in epilogue. Just so everybody knows, tomorrow we begin our Why I Remembers Yom HaShoah commemoration events. We have 2 full days of programming, and tomorrow we are featuring Eleanor Reissa's programs, her plays, and we're even going to do a big conversation about that and its ramifications. So Eleanor, at 2 o'clock we're doing Chenstochov, which is not your plays, which is a Jewish legacy, featuring one of our board members and someone we feel very strongly about, Leah Volanet. But at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be reading live. I'm going to be performing live a monologue that you wrote, which I find stunning. You're calling it The Last One, an epilogue. And would you tell us what it is?
Achoo!
Die sind Genossen auf Nemes.
Um, I wrote it in the 90s, and I had recently lost a cousin of mine who that monologue is based on. It's actually not based on my father, Avi. I mean, maybe you
Okay.
thought it was, but he's to me, he's a different guy than in The Last Survivor.
Right.
Very,
Yeah. No, I never
yes.
thought they were the same. I thought it was an amalgam of
It's really this. It's
others.
really not my father at all.
Right.
It's really a version of my cousin Leibish, who I
Okay.
loved very much.
Right.
And he died in 1990. And he was the last, for me, he was the last one. He was
Right.
the end. There was nobody like him. And so I wrote this piece where he goes he is the last one.
Right.
The
And
last
when we say the last one, just so everybody understands,
the
we're talking
last
about,
one who lived through the Holocaust.
right.
The last one who fought and succeeded in not being killed.
Right.
He is the last one that was there,
Right.
who saw it, who suffered it. Someday there will be the last one.
Right.
And for me, he was that, even though of course he's not.
Of course. Of course.
Um,
But
but
what that's why it's such an important piece from my perspective, because I know we are living in a period where sooner or later there will indeed be the last one.
there will be no one left.
Right. And then what?
And so that's what this piece tackles. This piece gives you an opportunity to see that man, to see that man, the one of a kind, the last of the last.
Right. So
Uh,
tomorrow at 5 o'clock, we are going to do that live. And it's a short piece. It's about 25 minutes, 20 odd minutes. So you and I are then going to discuss that piece and its implications immediately following the reading. And I couldn't be more excited. At 7 o'clock, we are going to be presenting your play, The Last Survivor, which is not the last one. It's a different piece with a very different and a full cast. So can you tell us a little bit about that piece? I know that there are some biographical elements to it, I guess, or autobiographical elements. But can you tell us a little bit about that and the people who are
sure.
participating? Because they're all
That piece was also written
incredible
in the
stuff.
90s, and that piece, the last one, an epilogue, was always meant to be the end of The Last Survivor. But nobody has patience to sit through such a thing anymore, so be it. I'll tell you about the cast first. Top of the line. I mean, I've done this play a number of times and always had a terrific cast, but I have never seen an ensemble like this in Zoomalach, in
Yeah.
little squares of Zoom, and they're wonderful.
Let
The
me let
play
me name them: Jill Abramowitz, Lori Wilner, Adam Grouper, Robert Zuckerman, Jacob Plummer, and the great Itai Benson, who I
and Avi Hoffman.
and me. Yes. Um,
So it's a play. It goes back and forth in time, and um,
the
and
Chicago
you
Tribune
get to
said,
meet a man who lived in extraordinary times and had an extraordinary life by most standards.
right,
Um, and it was my intention to honor him, my father, and uh, and his invisibleness and his suffering.
right,
But it's not a sentimental piece.
right.
It's tough. It's you know that's kind of my style.
The Chicago Tribune said it was profoundly, beautifully moving, a life affirming dance. And I have to admit, having read it with you already, and with that amazing cast, it is maybe one of the most extraordinarily powerful pieces that relate to this experience, and told in a non-sentimental way and not going for the easy. This is a complex, beautifully structured piece, and this particular group of actors under your direction, I think, has created an extraordinary event. So I encourage everybody watching now not to miss this at 7 p.m. tomorrow, and it will be available for 4 days after on our YouTube and on our Facebook. Um, but after that, I want to encourage everyone, and I know it's a long day, but Yom HaShoah only comes once a year, and we have to remember. We always have to remember, but we also have to discuss. So we are going to have 5 people on a panel after The Last Survivor tomorrow at 7. At 9 p.m., we're going to have a panel discussion called After the Last Survivor: The Future of Holocaust Awareness. And you will be the playwright who wrote the play The Last Survivor and the last one. You'll be on the panel. I will be moderating. But we have some, I mean, truly extraordinary people to discuss, um, you know, what happens after the last one. What do we do? How do we teach? How do we bring these lives that are no longer there into the awareness of the world? So we have Dr. Yael Danieli, who has had an extraordinary career at the United Nations dealing with genocide and trauma and refugees, also from Inzeret, from the Holocaust world, um, but has taken her experience and knowledge of the Holocaust into a different world. Stephen Lutzen from the original Holocaust Museum Commission. He was named by Jimmy Carter because of his knowledge, awareness, and concern. Leah Volinets from the Chenstochov Society, and Stacy Seance, who is 3G. She's not even 2G. You and I are 2G. Um, but she is 3G. She's already a grandchild of survivors who has been working very hard on the board of trustees of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and the museum in Washington. So I hope that everyone will stick around long enough to watch that panel discussion, because I think it's going to be extraordinary. Eleanor, what's coming? I mean, now you have a book coming, which is great. Hopefully, COVID, it will be
I'm
subsiding.
vaccinated. I mean, I'm
I'm getting
good.
my second shtoch on Thursday. I
It's a
can't wait.
wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I'm, what we just completed this second season of this podcast that I'm the host of. It's Yale University Fortunoff Video Archive uh, on the Holocaust, and it's called Those Who Were There, Voices from the Holocaust. I'll say it again.
Wow.
Those Who Were There, Voices from the Holocaust. And it's a magnificent podcast. There are Yale has um, all these archives, and this wonderful team of producers has turned it into an audio, a 30-minute audio thing, and witnesses of the Holocaust, people that lived through it, fought through it. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that I'm really proud to be a part of. And other than that, I'm
Where
singing
can
around.
they hear it or
You
listen to
just
it?
go online and type in "Those Who Were There" podcast, and
Okay,
you can hear it on spot wherever you hear your podcasts.
great.
It's very easy. It has a number of platforms. And Achitz Dame, I have some. I'm singing at the Yidstock at the uh, Yiddish Book Center as usual, but virtual, and I'm recording for them these stories by this that were translated into English by this woman who was like a court reporter, and I'm bad because ich gedenk nicht die Nummern. We haven't begun that, but so that's. I mean,
And what we haven't even mentioned is some of the most incredible things, working with Frank London, working with, I mean, with some of the greatest musicians, doing concerts all over the world.
I mean,
Elsa, you
I
are amazing.
with
Come on.
Harvey Varga, I translated the 10th Man for the Folkspina,
That's
that
right.
Avi you're supposed to be in as soon as we're allowed to do it. And I was in the HBO thing, Plot Against America, the Philip Roth miniseries. It was, before things are okay.
And I think as COVID subsides more and more, you and me and so many wonderful people doing this important work are going to start doing more and more.
All
Listen, you did
right.
a concert for us with Frank called No Turning Back. Was one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen in my life. People were calling me up in tears because it moved them so very much. So I'm hoping that we will find ways to be able to create even more from these incredible programs that we've already done, and all the incredible, even more incredible programs I hope we'll do in the future.
And
But
I just want to say Avi Yashikoyach to you, man. To
oh, thank
you and your staff and, Amy and Eloise,
you. Luisa, yes.
Louisa. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, just working, making, creating tirelessly, tenaciously, kala kavod, and, eat a good breakfast.
Een
And I
Esti
hope
Replag.
I just want to say, I'm always happy to do a pitch for you guys that people are listening. This doesn't happen by itself. So contribute to so that you can keep Yiddish alive, keep Avi alive.
Uh,
He doesn't live, these people don't live on air,
right.
you know.
Yeah. People don't
So
realize. And we do all our programs for free. I insist, for the time being at least, I insist on having all of our programs be free, because I've gotten emails from people who say we can't afford to pay for these things, especially now with COVID, people who've been unemployed for a
yeah,
year.
yeah.
So like Joe Papp, I want to think of what we do as the public's work. This is for the public, and the public may or may not be able to afford $5, $18, or 36 or whatever, and sooner or later we'll be back in the theaters and we'll be charging for tickets again. But we've discovered a whole world that is interested in what we do, loves the work we're doing. And Eleanor, you're such a big part of it, and I love you
Thank you,
madly.
Avi. Thanks.
And I
Thanks for
thank you
including me.
so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is Eleanor Reissa Day.
Yeah.
Why I Remembered Yom HaShoah, featuring Eleanor Reese's work. Please join us. Eleanor, thank you.
Thank you, Avi.
I'm going to just, remind everybody else what's happening on Thursday, and then I'll thank our sponsors, and I'll see you on the other side.
I'll
All
say good
right?
night. Good night.
Ashken Dank.
Danke stark.
I love you very much.
Thank you. Ditto.
So, Chevre, ladies and gentlemen, we are now, I would like to remind you once again that starting tomorrow, we are doing 2 days of Why I Remembers Yom HaShoah. So, I've already told you about our programs tomorrow, featuring Eleanor Reissa most of the day. On Thursday, starting at 2 p.m., an amazing program called Chess Masters to the Holocaust and Beyond, survivor David Friedman's art legacy with his daughter Miriam Friedman. This is one of the greatest artists who ever lived, who lived through the Holocaust. And interesting enough, he was most successful doing big billboards for Budweiser. So if that doesn't pique your curiosity, nothing will. So that's at 2 p.m. At 5 p.m., we're doing a conversation with Rabbi Rosalie Jarrett, who Eleanor and I were talking about, who is also a performer, singer, great composer who composed and performed in Songs of Paradise. But she is now a rabbi and a cantor who's created an organization. She's one of the founders of onebyone.org, which brings together children of trauma with children of the perpetrators of that trauma. In our case, children of the Holocaust with children of Nazis, and bringing them together in seminars to try to reconcile the pain and the hurt. That's at 5. At 6:30, there is a lecture by our dear friend, Professor Robert Watson, an award-winning best-selling author, talking about Terezin, the model camp, and all of that is in anticipation of our 7:30 internet premiere of a musical called Signs of Life, which is a musical drama all about Terezin. So that's at 7:30 p.m. with a great cast of actors from all over the country, and it's a musical. So this should be a wonderful program, which will be followed at 9 p.m. by a Meet the Creators of Signs of Life panel with the creators Peter Ulian, Len Schiff, Joel Durfner, producers Joan Lyman, Virginia Christ, and the director of the reading, Amy London, who is our wonderful producing director. And so, once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and for supporting all of our work. And I would like to just, leave you with um, with my thanks, my incredible gratitude to our sponsors. And I hope that you enjoy our work, and I hope that you will continue supporting the work of the Yiddishkeit Initiative. Thank you.